Little Nightmares 2 is a perfect sequel. Now, that doesn't mean that the game itself is 10 out of 10 utter perfection. It just means that as a continuation of the series, it is everything I hoped for and more. The first Little Nightmares was a pleasant hit from 2017, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself throughout the entire experience. I found it to be an extremely short adventure, with the game split into 4 separate sections, each having their own boss enemy to conquer. The first part is the janitor, the second being the cooks, the third being the hungry guests, and the final being the elusive lady of the ship. It's a formula that works quite well, but when the sequel was announced, I was hoping that that idea would be expanded upon, with more creative set pieces and even more creative baddies. Plus, maybe a couple more hours and a story that was still as airtight as the original. And my prayers were answered. Little Nightmares 2 is a great game, and it follows the same formula as the first to the dot. There are 5 sections: the forest, the school, the hospital, the city, and the tower. They're all longer than the areas in the original, and they each have more fearsome and memorable enemies. I'll be going over all of them today, which ones are the best in the game, and also which ones are the worst. So enjoy me talking about how Little Nightmares 2 is a perfect sequel. I was hoping that Little Nightmares 2 would start with a bang, and well, the game took that literally and figuratively. I loved the opening segment, even if it didn't really tie into the rest of the game as a whole. I felt it served its purpose mainly as a tutorial, and a way to bring back old fans into this new adventure. It's a fairly large opening as well. It starts deep in the forest, after your character, Mono, wakes up from a strange nightmare. I loved that the game continues the trend that the original introduced, of extremely memorable character design. All of the enemies are breathtakingly amazing, but Mono and Six both have arguably even better design. They are perfectly simple, and even though the game gives you hats to put on Mono, I kept the paper bag on the entire way through, just because of how cool he looked. Anyway, you wake up in the forest, and you press onwards through a series of traps set by an unknown presence. I thought these were clever ways to introduce us to the mechanics of the game, Mono having to jump, crouch, and throw things to get past the numerous bear traps, nets, and cages set up by the hunter. I loved how long it actually took to get to the main baddie of the area as well. The game gives you time to sink into its slow burn of atmosphere, instead of immediately throwing a boss at you. That slow build-up continues as you make your way into the small forest house and explore the insides. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time here, and the tension is built very well as you slowly make your way through the house, checking every corner before BAM! Random family of mannequins? Or are these people? We don't know. All I know is that this kid has an eye problem for sure, and he should get that checked out. Once you explore more, you realize your only option is the basement, because of course it is, and I was really expecting the big enemy of the section to be down here. But no, you find a girl, later revealed to be Six, and you get her out of the room she's trapped in, definitely not menacingly at all. I was surprised that they introduced the duo dynamic this early on, but after thinking on it, I'm glad they did. The fact that you have a companion in the game is one of the biggest departures from the original, and it definitely handles it fine. I was never floored by the addition of another character, but it wasn't bad by any means. It definitely spiced up the gameplay. Anyways, you and your newfound friend make it out of the house, and I was getting impatient at this point. I was so ready for the main bad guy to just show up out of nowhere, and, after jumping over a few more gaps, you do come face to face with the hunter. And boy oh boy, does this section not disappoint. The game decides to just throw you straight into the action, you being immediately shot at and chased, in a sequence that is just so good. I love ducking in and out of cover while this crazed lunatic shot at me. Fantastic stuff. There's loads of cat and mouse hide and seek in this section, and I felt it was a perfect combo of the stealth of the first game and action that showcased the higher budget and the fact that this was a sequel. Such great animation here. But all good things must come to an end, because after the hunter unloads like 17 rounds into random pieces of wood, and not you or 6, as soon as you're given a gun, you destroy him in one shot. I don't think that this guy was really meant to be a hunter. In all honesty, such a great opening this was. You and 6 getting on a boat and sailing across the river to get to the city. Breathtakingly good. Now, the real game begins, as you make your way through the desolate streets to This is where Little Nightmares 2 goes from very good to potential masterpiece. The school section is by far the best section in Little Nightmares history. Everything falls into place and works so freaking well here that I just want to pat all the designers on the back for such a good level. It's a long one as well. The school is definitely longer than the forest, but maybe not as long as the hospital in full. This is because of the trend that starts in this section that continues throughout the rest of the game. The use of multiple different enemies that rotate during the level, so you aren't facing off against the same thing again and again. In the school, there are 2 enemy types, the hordes of horrible school kids, and Miss Frizzle, the teacher, who is introduced like this. Nice. Both of these foes offer different styles of play. The kids segments usually involve evading their traps and fighting off hordes of them all at once with weapons you find. These sections, while not particularly scary, are a load of fun. The parts where you're smashing their doll heads in are really entertaining, but they really shine during the part where you put on one of their heads and have to walk through this whole cafeteria full of them. It's super memorable. You know what else is memorable? Miss Neckel over here, who at first I was kind of disappointed by the design of. I thought she was just this random teacher with a decently creepy face, but nothing special, until you make your way through her class to get a key. The shelf it's on falls down, and she comes in to check it out and oh my god! I hate it, I hate it, I hate it! Please, please, someone explain to me, how is her neck that big? How is it? I'm happy that I wasn't spoiled, to say the least. To make the matter even worse, then you have to sneak through her classroom again, knowing that her neck can extend to twice the length of the human body. Another thing that makes the area scarier is the fact that 6 is taken pretty early on by the school kids, leaving you alone. The game does this a lot later on to make things scarier, but the first time is definitely the most effective, as you have to climb around Miss Longneck in another just fantastic sequence, where she loops around stacks of books that you're hanging on for dear life. Just really, really, really good stuff. I'm glad she disappears for a bit after this though, as overexposure usually ruins good horror. She's used the perfect amount. We've saved the best for last though, as you face off against Miss Necromancer for the last time, in this just amazing part where you have to wait for her to stop and start the piano, to pull levers and push boxes, as she scribbles down music notes and plays the same 7 chords like 30 times. But just when you think it's over, she hears you. And how is that neck so long? Seriously, how is that neck so long? No, 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 no! Ah! Then, just like that, the section's finished. You and Six walk along the empty streets until you find yourself in the next part of the game. The hospital is really big. There really is so much content here, and in some ways it's better than the school, but in other places it falters. The hospital has 3 enemy types: the hands, which are just glorified school kids, the mannequins, and, well, we know who else. The level starts out fantastically. I love the beds suspended in the air, and I wish they had had more of that. It's a really interesting visual. You make it through the dark and desolate halls, and find yourself a flashlight. I'm on the Nintendo Switch, and controlling this thing felt wonky. As soon as I got it, I thought, I hope there's no level that requires me to use this janky controlled flashlight. But alas. You get to the main lobby of the area where you find another TV. This pattern of finding a TV and getting progressively closer and closer to the door is really cool. I like it, and it's a good tool of subconsciously telling you how far through the game you actually are. Anyway, this lobby is a bit like a hub area for the hospital. There are 3 different paths that you have to take in a certain order, and they get progressively better quality as it goes along. The goal is to find 2 switches to power an elevator that will take you down to the final area in the hospital. The first switch is quite easy. You wander through a couple rooms while being chased by a rogue hand. It's a bit tricky at first, but not once you get the hang of it. You annihilating it with your 2-handed Dark Souls weapon skill before you make it back to the lobby with half of the elevator key. This is easy, I said to myself. If only I knew, because the next area is the most frustrating level in the game. To get the other key, Mono has to do a loop around the back rooms to get to the other door of a locked room. You're basically doing a massive detour around the dark corners of the hospital. And well, these guys are really scary. Really, really scary. As soon as you turn off your light, these guys start moving slowly towards you. That slow turns into fast, and then the fast turns into a full-blown sprint straight for your jugular. But oh man, do these controls suck. Aiming the flashlight at a single mannequin is hard enough as it is, but then add in the fact that there are pitch black rooms with like 17 of them all coming at you. There are points in this segment that are just brilliant, like the part where you're running away from their hands sticking out of the wall, and then you get chased by like 30 of them. But for every moment of brilliance, there is a part like the last room, where there are no lights and like 20 mannequins. It's really annoying, and I wish they had never added it in the first place. These mannequin sections could have been my favorite area in the game, but they're let down by clunky controls. You meet back with Six and get into the elevator, descending to the final part of the hospital. With no big enemy found in the lobby section, I was expecting something to be down here. And, well, I got my wish. I think the school is the best entire chapter in the game overall, but the fleeting moments that you spend with the doctor are my favorite enemy encounter. His loud breathing, his tick or beetle-like body shape, and the fact that he's crawling around on the ceiling just make it so much better. And even though it's very short, I think it's a really good and memorable way to end off the hospital. When in the future I think of Little Nightmares 2, I'll think of the morgue and the doctor. I was surprised the most during the part where you nonchalantly go into the patient room and literally turn off the doctor's last patient's life support just as a distraction. Well, Mono is ruthless. Then there's this awesome chase scene, the doctor pushing over shelves and climbing around the ceiling, before you lead him into a one-way room and, well, oh, this is an incinerator. And then you go around and, well, yeah, he's dead. Jeez sakes! Forget Mono, you're the most ruthless person here. He just burnt up. Pay the man a bit of respect. I went up the elevator and through the exit of the hospital with mixed opinions. I thought it had the potential to be the best of the best, but as a whole, the hospital was a mixed bag. The fourth chapter is really awesome. It's kind of like the feast section of the first game, where there are hordes of enemies for you to go up against. Unlike the first game's feast level, the city is a decent length, balancing off puzzle solving and a still decent level of scares. The whole city is oozing with atmosphere. Rain falls and drips from above, and mist coats the ground, while droning music and the faint sound of TV hums make your ears uncomfortable. Out of all the actual places in the game, artistically, I like the city the most. The enemies aren't half bad as well. We have these random citizens who have all been infected by the radio tower. I really like their design, the fact that their faces have been melted away by this TV static. They're usually passive, following the TVs, but when they finally notice you and they all come hurtling towards you, it just blows any chase section of the first game out of the water. I also like going through the TVs. Just note, the TVs are really cool. I like zooming in and out of an area and coming into another one. It's pretty awesome. But the citizens aren't the only foe in this barren blue city. This guy is the real deal. Wow, what an introduction. From the moment you see him, you know that he's the main antagonist, and running away from the thin man in slow-mo before 6 is taken is just fantastically well done. After this inciting incident, you go throughout the level just waiting for him to be back. He doesn't show up for a while, but as soon as you put your guard down, the thin man is back, and you and him have this great chase sequence where you're running away on these suspended trains while he's glitching and moving after you. It all culminates in this awesome showdown right in front of the radio tower. You move and fight back against his force, and the rumble in my Nintendo Switch was really good here. So if the PS5 has better rumble than that, well, those are some very lucky people. You have a very long and drawn-out fight, and then it's over. You erase the thin man from existence, and Mono moves the buildings and everything, bending them to his will. It just looks so cool. Perfectly setting up the final chapter. Well, this is it, the final area in the game, and it does not disappoint. If Little Nightmares 2 hadn't been nightmarish before, it cranks it up to 10 in the final chapter. There's so much weird and confusing imagery here that it could only be found in the depths of someone's nightmare. I really did love the radio tower, even if it was a bit short. There isn't much gameplay here, mostly story, and while the story is very good, it's also very confusing. The main gameplay loop is the portal doors, which are an interesting touch, but I feel that there can only be like 2 of these puzzle rooms before they become really dull, and they do kind of overstay their welcome. The real definite highlight here is Big Six. Coming in out of nowhere, her design is great. Her long twisted arms and the sounds she makes all add to this horrific vibe that the tower has. I like this constant game of luring her away to go and smash the music box, even though I had no idea what was even happening. This confusion, it wasn't answered though. Instead, it got even more baffling as soon as the walls turned into flesh and eyes and started caving in on you. It was a great final set piece, and I was very impressed by the audacity of it all. It was just so insane. But that could not prepare me for what was to come. I was always expecting Six to betray Mono, but she really had to do him like this, dropping him off the edge into an infinite abyss. Like, come on! I was ready for the credits to roll, but Little Nightmares 2 had one last trick up its sleeve. The Thin Man twist is really good. It's like the twist from the first game's DLC, where the child gets turned into the gnome, but amplified. And watching Mono just sit on the chair for what looked like years and finally put on the trademark hat before you realized what room he actually was in was just phenomenal. Then, it ends. The game just cuts to black, and the credits roll. I was floored, to say the least. While I was watching the credits for Little Nightmares 2, all I could think about was how good this game really was. And more to the point, how great of a sequel it was. Little Nightmares 2 builds upon everything its predecessor set up. Everything, to the level design, art design, gameplay, and story, all are improved here. While I was watching the names of all the developers roll up on the screen, I also thought about what a success story this series actually is. An indie developer that has only 60 employees in total is making better products than AAA publishers could ever dream of. I was sad when I read that a third in the series isn't happening, but also happy. They made what they wanted and got out before it became stale. Thank you, Tarsier, for putting this much love into this series, and most importantly, into this sequel.